Fate played a cruel joke on the girl. Being a blessed virgin, she became the main antagonist. From the very beginning, everything seemed like just a terrible dream that would soon end. But over time, nothing changed. The siren found herself in the body of an 8-year-old girl with her own memories of a 21-year-old. When it all just began, it seemed like a real blessing and a gift from fate, because the girl didn't feel the need for anything, because she was born into a rich and influential family. People like her were said to be born with a golden spoon in their mouths. Everything was ruined by the knowledge of the plot of the book, which would end tragically, despite the fact that everything was going too well right now. The main characters of the novel will kiss at their own wedding, where guests will toast and praise them, and the newlyweds will be surrounded by blessings and good wishes. The siren will sit in a cold tower and hold the body of her beloved husband close to her. The young man will be called Aegis Cicero Fanella Kernaya. Having a cruel nature, the boy lived his whole life in misery, never knowing a kind word or good attitude from anyone, which made his heart cruel. The Achernia family was among the most influential families in the empire, and therefore boasted of their achievements and opportunities in various spheres of social life and business. It seemed that the goddess of fortune was on their side. But after the death of the old head of the clan, luck left Achernia. Their affairs went badly, and the new head of the clan did not show talent and abilities for business or any other business, which led to the family's decline. The new duke and his wife spent recklessly, squandering the wealth their predecessor had amassed. By showing no interest in financial matters, they lost everything they owned. Their merchant fleet was almost completely sunk during one of the typhoons. The goods and ships with crews of experienced sailors were irretrievably lost. The duke was aided by the Countess of Melfort, who lent him a helping hand in time. The condition on which she agreed to invest in the Achernia cause was their firstborn. Achernia family would never have agreed to such an offer. But things were so bad that the boy had to be given to the Melforts. This is how little Achernia ended up in the county of Melfort. The Countess began to actively work on the boy, putting the necessary and correct thoughts into his head for her. Even as he grew older, his studies and interests were tightly controlled by the Melforts, due to the Countess's plans for the future. The siren was to become the wife of the young Achernia, after which their joint possessions would be united into one, and the family of once famous merchants and owners of profitable businesses would remain in the shadow of the Melforts. The truth turned out to be even harsher. The Countess sought to possess the one born from the mixing of the blood of the Melforts and Achernias. The child of Aegeus and Serena was the old woman's main goal. Aegis possessed extraordinary magical abilities, and his level of mana surpassed that of anyone living within the empire or on the entire continent at the time. Countess Melfort also wanted to possess such power, but her family could not even come close to the power of Aegeus, which he still did not know. That is why the Countess decided to take him from his home and raise the little one and control the future sorcerer. The young man was to completely obey the Melfort family and love Serena thoughtlessly, who would also contribute her strength to the common cause of her family. The boy fell in love with the siren and followed her everywhere. He couldn't even live a day without the girl who used him as she pleased, and eventually destroyed his personality. The main character of the work was a girl blessed with divine powers named Juliana. Almost halfway through the book, she realized that Aegis was being manipulated and used as a toy. Juliana removed the veil from the boy's eyes and showed him the truth about his position in the Melfort family. At first, he did not want to believe the girl, but he succumbed to her persuasion. At the end of the story, Aegis disappeared somewhere. He left his savior, and he did it for the sake of the one who ruined his life. The young man came to the siren, without whom he could not imagine his life. The siren knew that he had broken free from the Melfort's influence, and so she ruthlessly got rid of the boy. But the harsh truth was that AJS longed to die at the hands of his beloved. Thus, the young man wanted to get rid of her, but was unable to make a willful act, and considered death at her hands the best way. This was their last moment. The girl finished reading the book and wondered if this story could repeat itself in real life, what this reality had become for her. The mother ordered Serena to bring the little boy to her. He tried to avoid meeting the Countess, but nothing worked. The boy prayed to be left alone with Serena, and the woman ordered him to be brought to her, because Aegis would suffer severe punishment for his disobedience. Because in the future, he could become even more disobedient than he was at the present moment. The mother's will was so strong that she didn't even have to do anything. With just one look, the woman could control everyone around her, making them fear and tremble. That is why she managed to get rid of all the heirs and contenders for the position of the head of the county and the entire family. Loving power and accustomed to the obedience of those around her, the woman took the highest place in the hierarchy. So now, with tears in his eyes, Aegis begged the girl not to give him to his mother. It hurt the siren to look at him, at the way he held the hem of her dress, but she had to persuade him to give up. The girl believed that she had no way to save the poor thing, but she could stall for time and give the little one a chance to live longer. The mother did not appreciate her daughter's kind heart and became angry. Melfort was a sadist, and no one in the house dared to pity and support the boy. The entire environment of the owner of the house was sadistic and cruel people who enjoyed the suffering of others. The girl begged her mother not to do anything to Ajas because he was feeling unwell today, but the woman's heart knew no pity. She still ordered the impudent man to be punished, despite his condition. After that, the countess gave the boy 2 instructions. The first was total, unconditional obedience to the Melfort family, and the second concerned love for Cyrena and the desire to always be by her side. It was very painful for the girl to watch all this, but she could not do anything. The siren felt very sorry for the boy, but everything that was done to him was for the good of the family, and she did not dare to go against it. To work with Aegis's consciousness, a special room was created, in which special incense and candles were burned, which caused hallucinations and weakened mind control. The sessions took place every week. This was done against Aegeus's will, so the maids often had to force him in. The boy resisted, but eventually found himself in a special room, broken and humiliated once again. His only hope at such moments was Siren, but she could do nothing about the boy. Although the girl's heart was breaking, she did not dare to betray and expose herself to danger. She had to play the role of a strict and haughty lady who controlled the situation and could dispose of Aegis's life. Ciri paid no attention to his pitiful looks and pleas. She was only 14 years old at the time, and the only thing she could do for the boy was to order the maids to treat him with care, not to injure or harm him physically. 3 years had passed since the experiments on Aegis had begun. The girl had noticed one interesting detail. The young man's face had recently begun to turn red when he looked at Siren. This only indicated that the boy's mind had not yet been influenced. Aegis was resisting Melfort's efforts. No one could notice this, but Ciri could see it with her naked eye. She often thought it would be better if the boy had just given up. It would have been much easier for him, and he wouldn't have had to suffer so much. Part of her didn't want Aegis to be brainwashed like that. As soon as the Countess manages to break his will and control his consciousness, the boy will become her puppet and will carry out her orders, lose his normal life, and become a puppet in the hands of the woman. And only when Serena was in her room did she feel normal. Amidst the gloom and darkness of the palace, it seemed warm and safe. The girl tried not to think about Aegis. Something tickled her ankle. The girl felt pleasant, and she didn't immediately realize that she was in a room with someone, and that someone had climbed into her bed and was touching and caressing her leg. It was Aegis. He pressed his lips to Serena's leg and kissed her. He did it passionately. And the girl felt terrible from the way he did it. Passion and obsession flashed through his movements. She soon realized that the boy was massaging her leg, which had a bruise on it. He wanted to please the girl and was simply stroking her. The siren thought that the Countess had succeeded in washing it this time. Aegis was crying. He asked for forgiveness because he saw the worry on the girl's face. Ciri thought that only in this house would the victim ask for forgiveness from her rapist. The boy asked not to leave him, even though he was not worthy of being with the siren. The girl understood that the boy's feelings were artificial. Loving and believing in what you love were 2 different things. Ciri thought that once her mother's influence and her own control over the boy were gone, he would have a chance to regain his willpower and freedom. For now, she just had to be gentle with him and not hurt him. The Countess's daughter allowed the boy to sit next to her on the bed, which he didn't immediately believe, but thought he was being mocked and simply mocked. It was hard to believe that he was being treated as an equal. He asked to hold Siren's hand. She agreed, and was surprised when she felt a light, gentle touch on her skin. It seemed that Aegis was taking a fragile and precious thing in his hands. The girl thought about the time when she would become an adult and have the opportunity to set him free, let him go, and stop bullying the heir to a once powerful and influential family. Ciri's heart sank as Aegis looked at her with eyes filled with silent adoration and love. At such a moment, she wanted to hug him tightly, never letting go. Since the last meeting between Serena and Aegeus, bells were ringing all around, announcing the beginning of the funeral. The main character of the day was the old Duke of Achernia, Aegeus's father. The death of the head of the clan caused a stir among his vassals and neighbors. After all, he never complained about his health. He was never heard to complain about pain or illness. The countess accepted the condolences and emphasized that the duke's death had been a great blow and surprise to her. Everyone around her felt sorry for the poor woman and were ready to come to her aid. The brother asked Sira what would happen to the strange boy who had lived under the same roof with them all these years, although he belonged to the Acherniae clan. Sira replied that he would now be sent to his parents' house. The children began to discuss the appropriateness of this decision. The boys believed that this was a hasty decision, that Ages had not yet been completely brainwashed, that he was not ready to fulfill his main task. But one of the brothers assured him that everything was fine. The boy had followed their sister relentlessly and was as loyal as a dog. His life was now closely intertwined with Serena, who would soon become his bride. Karen and Mexion were twin brothers, and that's why they were constantly arguing, with one always trying to get the better of the other, even though they tried to keep themselves in check. Ages and the guests stood over the coffin of the old duke, paying their last respects to the deceased. The duke's son attracted the attention of most of the people who were looking at him. One of the brothers approached Ages and threw his jacket over him. The boy told the poor orphan that crying in public was generally a normal thing to do when it happened at his father's funeral. The real reason became known when the boys moved far enough away that no one present could hear what they were talking about. Under the jacket, it turned out to be not Ages us, but a blond young man. The Melforn's eldest son, Michael. He explained that this task turned out to be more difficult for him than it seemed at first glance, but no one else could have coped with it. The countess, meanwhile, talked to people, accepted their condolences, although in reality she was thinking of returning home as soon as possible. Finally, her plan would begin to come to fruition. Sirens searched for Ages all over the house. Last night, the boy saw something creepy and frightening in the illusion room and tried to cut his own wrists. He must have gone a little crazy. The maid reported that the boy had been locked up in the basement. Ciri hurried to visit the poor man. She had been unable to find a place to stay all day because of the uncertainty about the prisoner. Ages was sitting on the cold floor. He didn't respond to Serena, who tried to shout at him. A rag was stuffed into the boy's mouth. A silent cry for help came from the young man. The siren crouched down beside him. Ages' body was trembling, his hands were shackled, and the girl begged him to calm down, promising that she would never leave him alone again. The shackles on the boy were of magical origin, and Ciri did not know how to remove them. The key that unlocked them was always kept by the Countess of Melfort, fearing that no one would kidnap the young man. Suddenly, the shackles broke. It seemed as if a powerful force had simply crushed them, and they shattered into many small pieces. The siren did not know how to react to such a thing. The next moment, Ages was hugging her tightly, silently, without words. Because all stories about love are made up, but this one was real. They sat in each other's arms, amidst the dirt and darkness, but it was here that their freedom was born. For a short time, Ciri felt scared. The boy held her tightly in his arms. It was hard for her to breathe. She begged him to let go and stop. But Ages remained deaf to her words. The girl remembered her childhood. Back then, little Agus was kept in the basement. She would quietly go down to the basement when no one was looking. She would bring him a piece of apple, bandage his hands, and read to him aloud. She was his Ray. It seemed to him that she was imaginary, a ghost. But her warmth was real. The Melfort daughter sat by the boy's bedside for a long time, until he came to his senses after all the abuse. Now Ages was looking intently into her eyes and begging her not to leave him alone for so long. It seemed to him that without her, he would simply go crazy. Every moment broke his soul, his will day after day. Serena decided not to tell him about her visit to his father's funeral. The young man had already had enough traumatic experiences. The news of his father's death could break him completely. The girl noticed the blood that was showing on the young man's bandaged wrist. He replied that everything was fine and there was no reason to worry. Siri was surprised that the young man did not show aggression or hostility towards her. Recently, Aegis had changed a lot. He didn't cry, he didn't beg for help. They took him to the illusion room for washing, and he obediently followed the servants. It was difficult to hear anything from him. This frightened the girl, who was now rewinding his hand. These changes could only mean one thing: the victory of the Countess of Melfort over the spirit of the poor captive. He would become a puppet obsessed with power. The boy asked Siren not to leave him alone for so long again. Next time, it might not be enough to just cut the veins on his arm. Aegis would dare to do something bigger and more serious in consequences. Siri noticed that the young man was no longer trying to resist. This behavior frightened her. The girl asked if there was any point in mutilating himself. Aegis replied that the point was in his service to his mistress. The Melfort's daughter has long decided to put the young man out of his misery. She will make sure that Aegis learns the truth about what is really happening to him, how they are trying to control him. Of Eternia for a while, she did not notice the joy on his face. Instead, the boy asked if this meant he was being abandoned. He watched the girl closely. Suddenly, Aegis asked if she would do such a mean thing to him after everything he had been through within the walls of this estate. He had been brainwashed, and now they wanted to throw him out. The young man said that the main reason for his suicide attempt was a vision in the illusion room, where he imagined the siren leaving him. The girl became curious about what kind of relationship they had in another life. Siri seemed to know everything about the lives of the main characters, but now something different was happening. Something that was different from the plot. She dared to ask if he was afraid of losing her. Aegis nodded approvingly. The Melfort daughter knew that the future of the Eternia family would be if the boy were freed from the Countess's influence. In that case, the duchy would regain its former power and its time of prosperity would come. But if Aegis bows his head to the Melforts, then his family will finally fall under the control of the Countess, who will take advantage of this, almost destroying Eternia and seizing their possessions. The girl couldn't tell the poor guy all this. She simply told him to find a way to prove his worth to her. In fact, the siren was thinking of ways to free him from captivity. She sat down next to Aegis and promised that after everything she would stay with him, and they would be together forever. He only had to prove his worth and importance to her. With this, she finally tied the young man to her. The mother spoke to Serena about the upcoming wedding. It was to take place in 4 days. Although the washing was not completely completed, the girl was to enslave Aegis on her own. The woman persuaded her daughter to become the lover of the heir of Eternia. In the original novel, there was no romance between Aegis and Serena. Their relationship then was of a different nature, more specific. The girl didn't want to do this. However, she understood perfectly well that this was the only way they could build a new future. This was the only way her mother would believe in her intentions, which did not contradict the Melfort's motives. The Countess was sure that Siri's beauty would put an end to all the boy's resistance. He would no longer try to show his will, his disobedience, but would submit to the one he could not live without. Her mother's confidence that Aegis would just appear surprised and impressed the girl. She had not considered that the Eternians were still a ducal race, and they would not tolerate such treatment. The lover's position did not satisfy Serena. She wondered, why don't they go further? After all, one could make the young man one's fiancé and marry him in the future. But the Countess refused this. She convinced me that it would be much better and easier with a lover. After all, it's hard to just break up with a husband. A lover can be abandoned and left to fend for themselves, alone with their problems. The girl tried to convince him that he shouldn't treat a member of the Eternia family as a simple thing. It would be better to use him and influence him through the siren herself and his attraction to her. The title of Duchess may become hers in the future. And now it is necessary to make the boy go crazy without her. Then he will become controlled and will not dare to oppose their common plan. The Countess liked the girl's line of thought, but Serena tried to convince her that it was her own choice and no one should pressure her. Melfort agreed with this, but convinced her that it was only her will. Siri was happy. After all, in this way she was buying time for both of them. The young man would finally become independent, and they would escape. The Countess's daughter understood that she might die in the end, but it did not frighten her. The girl came to August's room. The young man had not left there for several days, and now he was enjoying the company. The siren announced that the time of his return to his homeland had finally become known. By then, he needs to get himself in shape. And the girl must also tell him about her father's death and his right to become the heir to the old duke's place. Serena had been contemplating this step for a long time. The maid interrupted her. The girl reported that the Countess of Melfort had summoned her daughter to her. The reasons for this remained unknown, and it was worth hurrying so as not to anger the mistress. The mother was glad to see her daughter in the company of Ajas. The girl asked why they would go to the illusion room again. A week had not yet passed, and the Countess explained that this was due to their upcoming departure. The girl noticed that the candle that replaced the incense had changed. This time, the Countess decided to increase the dose of herbs and proportions in order to finally enslave the boy and bring him to submission. In the boy's current condition, such an increase in dose could be fatal for him and cause his death. The mother asked if Serena wanted to witness the last session. The girl asked if the risk was justified when the dog was already trained to follow its owner all the time. Siri said that Agas behaved as if he had become her loyal dog. The daughter convinced the Countess that it was not worth taking risks and jeopardizing such a long experiment, to which Melfort demanded a demonstration of the young man's submission to the will of the siren. The girl understood that her mother had no doubts. It was just that this time it would be the last test and lesson for the young man. Siri asked him with a deep and trusting look to submit and obey. The young man humbly knelt before the siren and kissed her shoes. The girl was convinced that this would be enough to convince the old countess of the success of the cause. The countess was silent for a long time, and soon ordered the herbs and elixirs to be brought. The siren hesitated whether she would have enough willpower to oppose her mother now. Her brother came to her aid, who reported the arrival of Akernia's carriage. The woman was indignant. She thought that the boy was supposed to be picked up in 4 days, and she still had plenty of time. Mexian assured her that they had simply mixed up the dates. Although he never mixed up anything and was punctual, the boy also said that he had ordered him to wait until tomorrow. His mother praised him for his quick wit and resourcefulness. The siren was happy that soon the nightmare for AJS would end and he would be free. Siri had another dream from her past life. She was killing Ages. For his own good, the girl herself was convinced. For her, it was a normal thing to do, and her conscience did not bother her at all. There was a knock on the door. It was Ajas. He had been having terrible dreams lately. The girl couldn't chase him away because she was the only one the young man trusted and could help him solve the problem. After using the enhanced potion, the boy's mana began to pulse even more strongly. The siren invited him into the room and promised to help him sleep. He didn't expect anything else. The young man grabbed her tightly, and they fell onto the bed. The girl was in pain, and Siri asked for his grip to be loosened. She would have to wean him off this attitude and behavior towards her for a long time, but they would be free. The boy obeyed and became a little gentler. The girl mentally wondered whether this could be considered a manifestation of her influence on Ages, and whether she would be happy with such an outcome. Surprisingly, she felt comfortable with him. The siren quickly fell asleep. Under the sweet confessions of love and gentle words, Siri plunged into the world of dreams and pleasant reveries. Only one thing was bothering her. Should the young man be told that his belief in love for the siren was the result of the Countess's suggestion? Or perhaps he realizes it, because he has been behaving unusually lately. The next morning, when the girl woke up, Ages was not there. It was the day when the young man went to his native home to take the place of the head of the clan, so they would not meet again very soon. Her brother interrupted her thoughts and asked if Siri had seen Karen. There was a bruise on the boy's face. It looked like the boys had had a fight, so she asked what had happened between them. The brother told me that this morning, before leaving, Karan threw a glove after Ajas. Karan asked him to stop because the day was not suitable for such a thing, so he tried to stop him. Karan became angry and struck Mexel directly in the eye. The case of the glove which was interpreted as a challenge to a duel, was always considered a challenge to a duel. Aegeus consistently defeated Charon in duels, but what angered Charon the most was that the enemy never counterattacked him. The reason was that the duke's son was under the influence. Charon himself got tired of attacking and gave up. Today, the reason for this attitude was that his brother noticed Aegeus leaving Serena's room. Charon could not stand it. It seemed to him that his sister's honors was being humiliated in this way, and he challenged her. And although servants and family members often noticed the duke's son, whose place was in the basement, coming out of the girl's room, it always affected the younger brother the most, and he simply went crazy with anger. In general, the situation was clear, and the brother needed to be found, because soon they would officially escort Aegeus to his homeland, and the absence of one of the Melfors could be misinterpreted. The girl noticed Aegeus immediately. He looked completely different today than he always did. The siren wondered if he would always look like this once he was free from outside influence. Charon himself came. His appearance came at a not very good moment. Aegeus was just asking the girl to give him her hand so that he could lead her. His brother had to hold Charon so that he wouldn't do anything stupid. Unexpectedly, Aegeus bit the girl's hand. He said it was in place of a wedding ring. The mark on the finger would constantly remind the girl of him. The siren assured her that there was no such need, but now was not the time for farewells and lovemaking. Aegeus was returning to where he had come from. The boy was to take possession of the status and estates that had come to him from his father and to raise his family. 3 years passed. The siren had nothing left to do but pray and mentally return to Aegeus. At first glance, it might seem that the girl believed in the god of this world. The girl became friends with the blessed saint of this temple, the main heroine of the novel, whose name was Juliana. The saint thanked the temple for its help and told how much she had been able to do with the donation. And when the siren assured that this was purely the merit of Juliana and her pious lifestyle, the Blessed Virgin replied that it was their joint merit under the protection of the Supreme One God. The real reason for such God-fearing behavior of the Countess' daughter was that in the original work, it was Juliana who managed to free Aegeus and correct his mind, restoring his freedom. Serena thought about how to organize a meeting between Juliana and Aegeus so that everything would look like a pure coincidence. And to top it all off, she had to inadvertently mention Aegeus's problem. If anyone finds out that Countess Melfort is involved in this and has voluntarily initiated experiments on the young duke's consciousness, then punishment will fall on all family members. Serena was faced with 2 options. One was to completely side with Juliana and take her brothers with her. The other involved the execution of the saint as a witness, so she was forced to do everything that was required of a believing girl, a girl who believed in God and hoped for his blessings and help. The real reason didn't matter for now. Juliana was called, and she was about to leave the company of the Countess's daughter, but promised to continue the conversation next time and show the temple and all the surrounding rooms, which she had learned about from the monks. The siren behaved in a friendly manner. The saint believed the girl, although she simply wanted to gain her trust and make friends. Juliana suggested that they spend as much time together as possible at the upcoming meeting. The girl even felt sorry for the Blessed One for some reason. Juliana had spent her whole life in the temple, and she did not know about the realities of real life outside the walls of the monastery. She should have been lonely there. After she received the status of a divine virgin, those who remained with her were either those who feared her, or those who asked for help in something, or to flatter the Holy Virgin and receive a piece of her gift. Juliana was frankly happy that she had managed to find such a friend. However, something worried her, something that did not give her peace. Some kind of suspicion was eating away at the girl's heart like a snake and tormenting her. Serena was helped by her mother's passion for collecting books. Among all the variety of literature, the girl could find exactly what she needed, exactly what would help free Aegeus. 3 years ago, the girl began researching the incense and herbs the Countess used to brainwash the boy. Her work progressed very slowly. The main thing became clear. For a long time, the boy was drugged and forced to live in a world of visions and hallucinations, suggestively influencing his consciousness and shaping his way of thinking. But what was most disturbing was that the incense and candles Melfort used in her evil deed were addictive, and Aegeus managed to hold out and not lose his mind after all this. Her older brother distracted her from reading. He asked why the girl was constantly busy with books. It seemed that she was not at all interested in the upcoming wedding, but lived in a world of fantasies and illusions. The siren asked what brought him to the reading room, where the boy rarely visited. He said that Aegis had arrived and wanted to see her right away. This surprised and confused her. Aegis's official departure to the Duke's estate, where he was to take over all of his father's affairs, Serena often visited the Akernia estate. She felt much calmer there than in her mother's house. The girl only had a year to enjoy her stay in the palace of Akernia. After that, Aegis often wrote her long letters, to which Ciri gave short answers, because she did not know how to write extensively enough. It was difficult for her morally, knowing about everything her mother did to him, and considering herself guilty for not being able to stand up for the boy. Serena could not calmly communicate with the Duke of Akernia. This time he decided to visit her in person. In his last letter, Aegis wrote to her that he missed her very much and wanted to see her, although Ciri doubted that this was the reason for his visit. The Countess's daughter often recalled those words about the proof of her worth from Agnes. The girl watched in amazement as the Duke's house rose and regained its place in society. In just 3 years, Akernia has made such a huge leap, and the young man constantly associates this with how much he loves Siren. This time, the girl did not want to see the Duke for some unknown reason. The brother replied that Ages had foreseen such a possibility and asked him to tell him that he would wait until the girl decided to see him. The coolness of these two was impressive. It took a long time before the girl realized that she was very tired. Thoughts about Ages confused and surprised her. She hoped that the Duke had already left, and she could safely return to her room. She walked quietly through the dark corridors. The girl thought about the guest. Somewhere deep down, Serena hoped that Ages was waiting for her in her room, and would be glad to see her, hug her, and hold her tightly, as he had done before. She did not reach the room. The Duke of Akernia met her in the corridor. The girl asked why he had done so, since she could have stayed in the library. Ages replied that he was going to her, to bring her warm clothes. The young man threw a warm cloak over Serena's shoulders and asked her to watch her condition so that she wouldn't feel sick. The guy said that his desire to see her was very strong and he couldn't resist. Ciri didn't know what to say. She tried her best to keep him away from her, but she really wanted Aegis to be there. She enjoyed spending time with him, and she felt safe. But his mother was not to see him in this house. The old woman still had doubts about his cover and how ready he was to obey her, to become a puppet in a political game. The young man asked if she remembered the moment when she asked him to prove his importance. The girl recalled the words with which she wanted to make him stronger and stimulate him to change, to develop. Aegis looked intently into Serena's eyes. He promised to make her an empress. These words struck the girl. They seemed frank and truthful. The girl did not believe it, but the Duke's expression was serious. Ciri asked what the boy was up to. Had he gone completely mad and was going to stage a coup d'etat? Aegis asked if she didn't like the idea. The siren couldn't recognize the boy. He really had to go through a lot after returning to the house of Akernia. The guy learned about the death of his father and his presence at his funeral, although in reality he was sitting in chains. The girl asked if he was ready to destroy a great state for the sake of his own ambitions. Aegis replied that for her sake he was ready to destroy even his own house of Akernia, to sacrifice everything for the sake of Ciri. After the conversation, the girl returned to her room. Aegis' words remained unanswered. 2 years ago, Siren began to ignore the Duke, and he still tried to meet her and talk. At that time, the girl became interested in the herbs and candles that the Countess used. After the necessary information was gathered, the siren prepared an antidote and immediately gave it to Aegis. The boy was suspicious of the bottle. The girl asked if he really thought she could poison him, but even if the siren tried to poison him, the Duke promised to drink it all. And this was the cause of everything that began to happen later. The veil fell from the young man's eyes. Clear consciousness returned to him. The boy's expression changed. Siren could only guess how he would treat her after everything she had done to him. The young man hated her. Pure rage burned in his eyes. They fell onto the bed. The Duke's hands began to feel the girl's body. The siren felt as if she were going to be strangled. She simply didn't have the strength to fight off the boy. Suddenly, she felt that Agus had burst into tears. Serena often thought about the possibility of her death immediately after the young man came out of his influence. She understood that she had changed the plot of the story itself, and therefore the ending had changed. It had become open-ended. But knowing that from that moment on, the boy would be free, no longer a slave to illusions, made Siri feel better. She was ready to accept death at his hands, because she had long wondered whether it was worth living at all. One of them was definitely going to die. The siren from the original remained alive. So now, in this alternate version, Aegis will pay her back for all the suffering and torment he suffered at the hands of the Countess and her daughter. The girl stood up on the bed. She looked at herself in the mirror. Nothing terrible had happened. It seemed like she had a terrible dream. However, all this was happening in reality, and the marks on her neck were evidence of this. After this incident, Serena left the Akernia estate, deciding never to return there again. It was then that the girl promised herself to avoid the company of Aegis and stop communicating with him. The Countess's daughter decided to rectify the situation. It was necessary to restore balance to Aegis's life. Therefore, she spent the following years searching for the potion. The problem with its preparation lay in the ingredients, and the elves were also in the way. It was in their possessions that the rare herbs that the siren needed were located. Relations with the elves and humans had recently deteriorated greatly, and it was not worth falling into their hands. It wasn't always like this. From the very beginning of their existence, elves were famous for their preparation of medicines and various kinds of preparations. They spread their achievements among people, helping in healing and saving lives. 30 years ago, something happened that put an end to the friendship between humans and elves. The daughter of the Elf King and the prince of the Empire fell in love with each other. Neither side could oppose this union. No one had any complaints about this until the elf girl died under mysterious circumstances. Gossip spread that the prince had killed his beloved on suspicion of treason. The elves demanded punishment for the crime, as they were convinced of the young man's guilt. The emperor did not allow his son to stand trial, but ordered the rebelling elves to be punished for treason. After that, the anger of the magical creatures filled their hearts, and they decided to go far into the depths of the forests, where they would live without the interference of the insolent and ungrateful creatures they considered cruel people. The girl needed the help of an elf. However, finding him would be a very difficult and risky undertaking. But no one except the sharp-eared ones could help her in making medicines and preparations. But there was actually a way out. The novel was about the Duke uncovering the illegal slave trade. Among the captives were elves, so it's worth helping Aegeus find out about it and fix the situation. After this, the Duke gained a huge credit of trust from the elves, and never again intended to fight them or start conflicts in his possessions. Indeed, a period of prosperity began for his lands. The girl tried to remember the name of the man who had concealed the slave trade from AJS. It seemed to Serena that his name was Viscount Cullen. Although he was a famous man, he was capable of such meanness. And although, according to the plot, the Viscount himself will die at the hands of Aegeus, it was impossible to miss such an opportunity to find and establish contact with the elves, so Ciri decides to write a letter to the Duke of Akernia. The girl was looking for her older brother at the training ground. The boy replied that he was busy this time, and it was clear that he was getting revenge for the last time Ciri wouldn't talk to him. The sister sat down on a bench nearby and promised to wait for him. The loving brother's heart could not bear this, and he asked if she had really come to him with an important matter. The siren asked if he could find an invitation to Tosipo for her. The girl's request surprised the young man. He could not understand why his sister needed to get to a secret auction where slaves were traded. Tosipo was the pseudonym of Viscount Cullen, as he was known in secret circles of confidants and traders of humans and elves. Many looked on his affairs through the fingers, not noticing anything. Michael was one of these people. Although the boy gave the impression of being a fool at times and a simpleton at times, he was able to take his place quite high in the hierarchy of the secret organization. Despite all his good qualities, the boy remained the brother of the main villain. Mikhail's expression turned cold. He had never been like this, even though that was his true form. It was clear that the boy was trying to understand how his sister had learned about his membership in the underground. Mikhail was ready to answer, but he was calculating all the pros and cons. all the risks and consequences. The young man finally replied that his sister should not have such information. Serena advised him to hide such information because what she knew about them was not her problem, but the boy's problem. The siren also said that she needed that invitation in any case, and she would definitely get it, no matter what means. No one knew where and when the next auction would open, so she was bluffing. The invitation for Mikhail should have arrived by now. His sister said that she was not just looking for an opportunity to get there. In return, Serena offers a portion of her blood, which contained a portion of magical mana. Mikhail was always delighted with his sister's blood. He called it very good and unique in its kind. Many times he suggested using it in experiments and research. One day, Serena agreed. Her brother took a sample of blood and did various manipulations with it in the laboratory. After that incident, when the girl became very sick, she never allowed this to happen again. The girl's offer seemed too small for such a favor to the young man. Serena had promised to give 10% of her deposits. It was a gift from Ajez for his last birthday. But Mikhail refused. He did not want to put his sister in danger because hanging around in such circles was clearly dangerous and harmful to both life and reputation. The young man was even forced to give up the deposits. He was about to leave when the sword of mana created by Siren was aimed at his throat. The girl advised him to be careful with it, because if an extra millimeter of mana was not controlled, Mikhail would die. The young man tried to push the sword's edge away with his hand. However, his sister's strength now outweighed his. Siri promised that none of the knights would notice because she had cast a disguise spell. But anger gave strength to his brother, and he threw away the sword. The girl thought that it was no use teasing him any longer. Mikhail was not as simple as he seemed at first glance. He was a dangerous opponent. The guy wasn't going to let her go just like that. A vortex of magical energy swirled around the girl, and she couldn't go any further. The siren was forced to be left alone with her brother, who wasn't going to forgive her. Mikhail's sword was at her throat in an instant. If the poor thing had tried to swallow the saliva, she would have simply slit her own throat. This time, more powerful magic was needed. The girl asked why her brother wouldn't let her join the auction. He replied that there were serious reasons for this, and he didn't want to risk her life and put his sister in danger. The siren wondered how this fight had come about between her and her brother. Mikhail usually looked at her as if she were a flower, but now the boy was determined not to let her in, not to let her go to the auction. The young man's strength was much more powerful than Siren's. She understood perfectly well that the battle was over, and Mikhail would simply stun her to avoid bloodshed. That's exactly what happened. The attack was decisive and inevitable. The girl was still standing. The guy asked her to surrender and stop resisting. He didn't want to hurt her. But Serena stubbornly continued to stand her ground and demand a pass to Tisipo. In fact, the girl was holding on with all her strength. Her energy to resist was also at its limit. She couldn't hold on like this for much longer. After all, the opponent was much stronger, and she was lucky that he was giving in. Using Manhwa could help, but it would take a long time to calculate and prepare. Mikhail would not give her that pause. He would wait for the right moment, when her sister would simply surrender to his will. Siren's strength was leaving her, and she fell to the floor, hitting her head painfully, nearly losing consciousness and bruising badly. The brother leaned over her and asked, "Why didn't she take cover?" The girl replied that she had actually just successfully completed the calculation and was ready to attack. A magical barrier appeared between them. Mikhail was on the floor. The siren warned him not to try to resist. She wasn't as strong with edged weapons, but her magical skills were much stronger than his. The girl added that with such power, she could feel at ease at the auction. To which Mikhail replied that 30% of the deposits would be his after she received the information. The boy pointed out where to look for the invitation and said he was starting to get a little scared of his sister. She replied that she was only doing it for the good of the family and their own safety and status. The siren walked through the dark night streets of the city. The girl wore a mask on her face that hid her features. No one was to know that the daughter of the Melfors had dared to come here. When the guard asked to see the pass, he recognized the special object that marked the pass and indicated the owner's identity. He hesitated for a moment, but Serena ordered the manager to be called. The wait was not long, and Viscount Quilon arrived quickly. He could not force the guest to be alone and wait for the gentleman to appear. The man said that he would do for the honored guest anything he wanted. The girl was surprised at the influence her brother wielded. Otherwise, the organizer wouldn't have been so condescending to Lotto. Siri thought about how much she didn't know about the world around her. Time to get down to business. The guest asked Keelan if it was true that they would be selling the elf this time, and if there was a way to pick it up right now without bidding and competitors. The man replied that it would be the main item of the evening, and he couldn't just sell it. The corresponding lot would be shown at the end of the evening, so it was worth waiting. And there was no doubt that Lotto would own it. She simply could not wait until evening. The Duke's forces might soon arrive, and then her plan would surely fail. She wondered whether she should resort to a backup plan. The siren demanded with intensity where the elf was being held. Keelan knew that it was not worth refusing Mr. Lotto, so he was going to order the guards to go and show the elf. Mikhail's fame was helping Siri. Behind the bars was an elf. She was begging for help and screaming loudly throughout the dungeon, despite the guards' efforts to shut her up. The Duke's forces were soon to arrive and rescue the poor thing. Keelan apologized. He himself did not like it when the product behaved too loudly and defiantly. But it was worth waiting a little, and Mr. Luto would see everything with his own eyes and appreciate the novelty. Behind the bars lay an elf. He was a young man, his body showing signs of beatings. His neck was covered in bruises, and it was clear that he had tried to resist the enemy until the very end. Keelan noticed the guest's interest in this lot and offered to make concessions. He promised to give the elf for a separate fee. But Lotto asked to simply step away from the door of the cell. When the girl used her magic, it became very cold around her. She ordered to get out in the same icy voice. Keelan obeyed and silently ran to the exit from the dungeon. The elf was lying on the floor. He didn't react in any way to the use of magic. The girl was worried about whether he was in a normal mental state right now, and whether it would be possible to extract information from him. Suddenly, the captive asked if the stranger was still going to buy him. The siren decided not to reveal her secret to the elf. However, she was bursting with pride that she was the one who would save him. When she finally told him she had come, he didn't answer. She wondered if she should even release him from custody, because he might be empty inside. A mental disorder could have already taken root in him. The siren could never have imagined that the elf, who had become a symbol of willpower and pure consciousness, could be broken inside. Suddenly, he came closer to her and looked at her carefully. The girl promised that everything would work out for them, but he had to obey her orders and commands and behave humbly and obediently. But the captive had lived too long in this world to understand that things were rarely done for nothing. He asked what was required of him, and Siri replied that she would ask one favor in return. The siren said that all he needed from him was to share the secrets of making the secret potion, as well as tell him about the methods of purification. She was not going to do anything else with him. After he helps prepare a special remedy, she will release him. The help will remain a secret. None of the elves will know about their interaction. Well, it's worth just thinking about it. The elf asked why he should believe her, to which the siren told him what it cost her to get here and how difficult it was to use someone else's name. So he shouldn't have any doubts. She had no evidence, so he had to take her word for it. Whether he would use her help or not was his choice. In any case, he would be free with her support. One of the main characters of the work saved an elf during a raid organized by Cylon. In this, Hippen relied on the principles of the knightly code. But now the siren was guided by personal motives. The captive held out his hand to Siri and begged her to keep her word. In return, the elf asked that his name be Akelt. The girl hesitated with her answer, for she had heard much about the mystery of the name. Finally, she shook his hand. The elf looked at her pleadingly. On his hand was a special bracelet. It was a magical artifact, and the siren asked not to try to deceive her. She would remove the bracelet when their deal was fulfilled. To reassure her partner, Siri put a similar bracelet on her own arm. Now they were bound together by a strong spell. The siren decided to return to the mountain. The auction was about to begin, and her delay might arouse unnecessary suspicion. Finally, the girl advised not to try to escape if something unexpected happened. His savior thought it would be better for Ikelt to stay and hide. He couldn't understand who this girl was and what influence she had. But for some reason, he really wanted to trust her and cooperate with her in the future. The girl returned to the main hall. There, amid the applause of the crowd, the bidding had already begun. Serena thought that everyone around her had taken their places according to their rank and position in the underground. Finally, after the decorations for the rooms, the expensive decorations, and all sorts of unnecessary things, it came to the main item. We had to wait a very long time. Siri was tired of waiting, and she couldn't find a place for herself. The elf was led to the center of the hall and began to talk about how he should have become an ornament to any aristocratic home. The girl was surprised that the life of such a creature cost so little. The men around him were shouting an ever-increasing amount of money. Many wanted to become the owner of the wonder. However, now all the attention of the elf himself was focused on the appearance of his savior and the further development of events. The siren calmly watched what was happening around her. She was waiting for the moment when she would offer an amount that no one would dare to exceed. But suddenly, the boy next to her offered more. The stranger offered 5 million gold. Everyone around him looked at him in surprise, because they thought that was too high a price, even for such a wonder as an elf. The girl offered an amount that exceeded the offer by dozens of times. However, the stranger raised it even more. He must have been extremely rich and influential to have such funds. The siren was in prostration. The money that was offered for the elf could be worth an entire castle. So the girl decided that it was worth thinking about further bargaining. If she continued, she would lose a lot. However, the costs were as great as the need for this elf. So it was worth thinking carefully about further matters. Was there a possibility of defeating the stranger? Mikhail lay in bed and thought about how tired he was of lying around like this. He thought about his sister. She was no longer a little girl. With the help of magic, she had managed to defeat even him. Often it seemed to him that in front of him was still the same girl that Siri had been in childhood. The young man sometimes remembered his childhood and realized that he missed those times. They seemed carefree and very distant. And although he had witnessed her capabilities today, and with her magical abilities, she could even go to the tiger's cave, Mikhail was still worried for her, because anything could happen at the auction. The Duke received a letter from Mikhail before the auction. This was how the young man decided to warn his sister's future husband that Serena was going to visit for a reason known only to her, the auction. This news worried Augustin. He wondered why his brother couldn't go after the girl so as not to put her in danger. He would have been very surprised if he knew that she had beaten Mikhail the day before. But the Duke was more interested in what exactly the girl was going to buy at the auction. When he gave her the most expensive and unique gifts, she showed no reaction to them. So this could have been a reason to visit the auction. The girl would show what exactly she was interested in, and this would be a good clue for Augustin for the future. The Duke thought that the girl would only be interested in jewelry. He was very surprised when Siri began to bargain for an elf slave. However, Augustin was more concerned with the girl's beauty. Even in a man's costume, Siren stood out for her beauty. Her eyes gave rest to anyone who looked into them at least once. The Duke wondered why she needed an elf slave. Augustin thought that the girl had become completely bored and was now looking for entertainment. And for this, she needed an elf, a handsome man, no matter what tortures he had to endure in the dungeon. When the Duke's beloved began to bargain for the elf, he was determined not to let the slave go to the girl. It would be better if the creature died at the hands of Augustin himself, but not touch the siren. The Duke could not allow this creature to be near his beloved. Therefore, at any cost, he had to buy this elf. No one would be able to guess who this mysterious buyer was. The elf looked intently at the balcony where the siren was supposed to be standing. He was curious about how strong the motivation of the mysterious savior was. She didn't seem frivolous, and she needed the elf. The bidding was interrupted by a servant who entered the hall, looking shabby. He announced that the deal was bad. The Knights of the Dark Wolf had arrived at the auction. The siren thought that everything had begun. Finally, one of the main characters of the work was to arrive. It was Hipron. Ites, an operation to close the auction and catch all the underground participants and shut down this illegal event. The guests thought of scattering and fleeing. The gentlemen abandoned their ladies, trying to save their lives. But Hipron was noted for his cruel attitude towards all disturbers of public peace. The siren thought that she had to get out of her seat as soon as possible, because the hall would soon be full of people. The main priority now was to find the elf and take him away. Already in the corridor, Serena realized how much time she had wasted. The chase could catch up with her at any moment. Added to all this was the fact that she had to be careful not to run into Kipron's men. She failed. On the stairs below stood one of the knights of the Black Wolf Order. The man suggested that she surrender to avoid trouble, but Ciri had prepared herself for such a turn of events. The girl had prepared a magic formula on a piece of paper to shorten the time it took to use magic. But now the paper had disappeared somewhere. It was too late. Ciri knew that she should use her sword now. The siren held out her sword in front of her. She was serious. The man did not see such an opponent as a serious threat. He assured her that he would immediately remove the mask from her. The girl's attack was lightning fast, but her opponent was even faster. Hypron really picked up worthy warriors. But the time had come to really use magic and Mikhail's enchanted sword. Soon the man was lying on the floor. Mikhail's magic sword had an additional magical artifact. Invisible magical threads penetrated the enemy's body before the blade made contact with him. And it is impossible to close yourself off from the threads, like from a sword attack. They penetrate the body with the start of the activation of the magic spell. However, there was a minus. It was a disposable weapon, until the next spell. Meanwhile, the elf was sitting and hiding. His bracelet was glowing. The elf was thinking about what the girl would do in this situation. She was different from everyone else, and therefore she should keep her promise and not run away. He remembered conversations with his relatives. They had hinted from the very beginning that humans were a vile race, capable only of meanness and all kinds of lies and deceit, and that they could not coexist with them. The elves thought that they were concerned with justice, while humans only thought about profit. There was a very great gulf between them. Curiosity, whether it was true or rumor, led to captivity. The man was pulled out of his thoughts by a look into the hiding place. He saw the elf and was glad that such a valuable item was now in front of him, and he would take possession of it. The man immediately aroused aversion to himself. The scoundrel's body suddenly burst into flames. He cried out for help and called for someone to put it out. The elf even felt sorry for his attacker for a moment, but the man's suffering meant the elf's freedom. Suddenly, the prisoner realized that the fire was not burning him. Everything around was burning, but the fire did not touch the elf's body. Perhaps it was the magic bracelet on his arm. This could not be a coincidence. It was already running towards the exit from the main hall when an unknown force knocked him off his feet. He fell to the floor and tried to understand what had happened to him. Somewhere above him, a familiar voice sounded. A masked man leaned over the elf. He carefully examined the captive. Even in such a situation, people primarily saw some benefit for themselves, not caring about the lives of others. But the closer the stranger was, the more the elf felt the danger from him. It seemed that this man was the enemy of all living things, and suffering gave him pleasure. The stranger noticed a bracelet on the slave's hand, and with a flick of his fingers, magically removed the artifact. He asked where the elf, who had previously spent several weeks in a dungeon, had gotten this thing. The man in the mask was amazed at how beautiful the elf's face could be. He had never seen anything so beautiful in his life. And Eek's consciousness was gradually clouding over. He was losing touch with reality. The slave began to lose hope for his salvation. He could not cope on his own. His strength was leaving him after a long captivity, and his body did not obey. It was not the first time he had lost hope, and the stranger approached the elf closer and closer, saying that he had firmly decided to make a scarecrow out of him to show to his guests. Moreover, this would not be his first elf victim. The touch of this guy sent shivers down Eek's spine. It was not worth relying so much on a human girl named Siren, but even so, it was worth trying to protect yourself and stand up for yourself. But the stranger had noticed his attack in advance. He grabbed the elf tightly and pinned him to the floor with his powerful hand. It was worth getting this over with because the knights would soon get here. Hipron stood opposite the girl. She was trying to understand what to do in this situation. There was no such scene in the original plot. The Duke was not even supposed to enter this room, but to wait outside. He couldn't let her know who was in front of him. The girl remembered that they had often met and even danced at parties. Her eyes could give away her identity. It was at this time that the Duke asked if they could meet somewhere. The girl replied that they could cross paths, and who was not familiar with the great ruler. But the words did not have the expected effect. The girl thought that the Duke would still find out who was in front of him. With the help of magic, she only managed to partially change her appearance and voice. She did not have enough time for a complete transformation. It was also impossible to defeat Hypron in open combat, as he was the most distinguished knight and possessed a high level of sword fighting skill. Even magic was powerless here. The warrior was determined to find out who was hiding behind the mask. After all, this stranger had managed to defeat and almost kill one of his best men. And such a person could not be left alone. A silhouette appeared behind Siren. It is unknown who came up from behind and covered the girl's eyes with his hands. The stranger covered her from the Duke's attack and hid her with the help of a magic dome. It was a strong spell. Hypern was left alone. Only a moment ago, the enemy was almost in his hands, and now there was nothing in front of him. He stretched out his hand to make sure that it was not a matter of disguise or illusion. The siren and her rescuer found themselves in an abandoned hut. The girl could not believe that someone would dare to use the magic of teleportation. After all, it was difficult and risky for the user. The girl noticed that she owed her salvation to the stranger who had constantly lowered her price for the elf. Now the young man was trying to hide his face, diligently covering it with his hand. The teleportation had broken all the magical disguises that Siren had been using. Now she stood completely defenseless before the unknown. It seemed that he was not surprised to see her in front of him. To begin with, Ciri thanked him for saving her. After all, she had indeed been under the sword of His Highness Duke Hypern a moment before her death. The defender remained silent and tried to turn away. The girl asked why she had the feeling that they had known each other for a long time. However, the stranger insisted that they had first met at an auction and had been rivals for a long time. The siren knew she would look stupid if she asked, but she wondered if he could help her one more time. Even though her idea seemed stupid and devoid of common sense, there was still a backup plan to be implemented. The bracelet that the girl put on the elf's hand was not just a confirmation of the deal. It was supposed to protect its owner from all kinds of dangers. And at the same time, it was a powerful transmitter of magical energy. Before the auction itself, she had drawn a magic circle near the auction site, and now she could transmit her energy there. If something went wrong, the girl would immediately move to that circle and be able to help the elf escape from that house. That's why she had been searching for a dark, abandoned place for a long time. But after the knights appeared, everything went wrong. Even the backup plan fell through, and Ciri didn't know if the elf had managed to survive that whirlwind, or if it was even worth trying to risk her life for him. But the efforts of both magicians, the stranger and the siren, yielded no results. The girl understood that the bracelet had been taken from the slave. However, this could have been done either by the one who put it on, or by a much stronger magician. The working hypothesis remained the guesses that Ikelt met someone who had skills in higher magic, and who removed the magical artifact from him, so it's worth moving on again. The siren knew that only a small number of people could use this magic, and moving in teleports required a lot of mana and concentration from the user. It remained a secret who her assistant was. Even for archmages, teleportation was a higher level of magic. They didn't always agree to demonstrate it, and using it with someone was generally a bad idea. At the girl's request, Ajistan refused to help. He thought it was not advisable to return there. Serena thought about the reasons for the refusal. It was impossible to say that the magician was tired. It seemed like he could have opened the teleport a few more times. What was alarming was that the portals were even visually very beautiful and neat. The siren hesitated whether to ask again. Ajistani took Lotto's hand. He was against returning to the main hall. There was fire and chaos there now. Ciri asked him not to interfere anymore. She would pay for the rescue later. Her words might have seemed harsh to the stranger who had come to her aid several times, but despite her gratitude, there was another, more important matter. She still hoped to save the elf. In general, if it weren't for this magician who constantly raised the price and dragged out the bidding, which provoked the Duke's attack. Unexpectedly for her, the magician offered to go with her and help. The siren asked if the sorcerer's mana would be enough for her to use it in the future. He replied that the supply of magical energy allowed her to cast spells and magic spells for quite a long time. Sira had no good reason to abandon such a powerful ally. She also wondered if the mana would fail her at the most crucial moment, because then both she and her partner would be in danger. The girl asked to open a portal to the second floor of the main hall, from where she had previously watched the auction. This was how she could see everything around in detail, although smoke covered most of the room. Ajastane asked if Lotto was really trying to find the elf, and why was he so certain that the slave had managed to survive in this chaos. Besides, even the knights could have simply killed him. Unexpectedly for Serena, the stranger was happy. He said that he no longer needed to look for the elf. In fact, Ajastane was glad that his competitor had simply disappeared, and he didn't have to worry about it. Finally, Ciri's search was crowned with success. She found a nobleman in a mask, behind whom lay the body of an elf on the floor. At first glance, it seemed that the sharp-eared one was dead, and that still needed to be clarified. The siren stood opposite the scoundrel, who had gotten rid of the elf. She asked who he was, and he promised in response that Lotto would replenish his collection of stuffed animals. These words sounded with a challenge. The stranger, who was trying to kill the elf, threw his hand forward. He threatened to use a deadly spell on the siren. Ajastane was already rushing to the girl's aid. The Duke pulled the girl aside and hugged her close. It was strange and unexpected. After all, the stranger in that case should have guessed that under the mask of Lotto there was not Mikhail. But the girl did not want to break free. The attacker asked Ajastane if he could let Lotto go and not interfere in other people's affairs. At the same time, it seemed that they were acquaintances. The Duke replied that he did not understand what was being said. Instead, he asked to get rid of the elf and get out of this place before the Black Wolf Knights got here. The siren thought that this stranger wasn't really helping, but rather the opposite. The girl pushed the rescuer away and ran to Ekelt. She hoped that he was still alive. Otherwise, her whole plan would have turned out to be unnecessarily dangerous and meaningless. The elf turned out to be alive. He had simply lost consciousness. The siren began to bring him to his senses. The ceiling, which could fall on his head at any moment, added to his energy and enthusiasm. The stranger who threatened Ikelta and Ciri said that he would be happy to play with them again, but he would disappear first. Finally, he promised that they would meet again. The siren wanted to pursue him, but the situation did not allow it. She turned to her sudden partner and asked if he could carry the three of them through the portal. He silently ordered them to prepare. For a moment, everything around them spun, and the girl and her companions found themselves back in that old hut. The siren asked Ajastane how long he would be hiding under the mantle. She recognized him. How she found out. There was no secret to who was before her. The young man was disguised, but no one except Ekernia possessed such power. The sorcerer's mana seemed boundless and endless, and no one would just help and risk their status and life. His excessive concern also pointed out who her savior was, but Ciri pretended not to suspect anything. The paradox of the situation was that the girl was trying to save the elf in order to later help Ajastane, and he almost destroyed the only one who could help free Ekernia completely. Now the siren asked what the Duke was doing at the auction, and how he had guessed who was hiding behind the Lotto mask. The young man asked how she had found out, to which the future bride said that it would be strange if she did not recognize him. Ekernia asked why the girl had become an elf. Ciri replied that she had simply had her eye on him for a long time. These words made the Duke jealous and think badly of the slave they had saved. The girl replied that it was indeed a very cunning revenge, but she had no other choice. After all, it was the Duke who had prevented her from settling everything peacefully and had ruined both her plans. So it was a rather sweet revenge. The siren understood that until she completely freed Ajastane from his influence, she would be the initiator of everything that was happening. But right now, she just wanted to enjoy this moment. Suddenly, Ajastane grabbed the girl by the hand and asked her why she had given him the bracelet. The girl insisted on letting her go. Otherwise, the Duke would see her for the last time today. The young man asked why the girl was playing with him like that. She understood perfectly well that the young man was very jealous of her. He simply went crazy when she was with someone else or paid attention to strangers. The siren tried to explain that she actually needed the elf for an important matter. The moment had come to tell the truth, and Siri explained that only a slave could tell the secrets of the medicines. Despite the girl's hope that the young man would be pleased by her words, doubt and disappointment were clearly visible on the Duke's face. Did the news that the leash would disappear upset him? The guy asked if it could be interpreted as her abandoning him. He explained that if a bird that has been in a cage for a long time is released, it will not fly anywhere. The unknown will scare it. Now, Ajistan resembled just such a bird, and Siri had a choice to make, whether to release the bird by force. She explained that she was not going to throw him away, but simply wanted to free him from suggestion and illusion. The young man took her hand and explained that there was no point in suggesting anything. He had loved her from the very beginning, and now he did not want to move away from her and remain alone. His love for her was boundless. Serena tried to explain that the guy might lose his feelings of love for her, not hers. But if it was real, then there was no point in worrying about it and worrying about such a trifle. Ajistan promised that his attitude would not change. He had loved her for a long time and had never thought anything bad about her, even when he partially learned how they had been experimenting on him all these years. The siren, in turn, wondered if she really loved this young man or if she was just taking advantage of his kindness. She really wanted everything to be serious and not based on illusions, but still, the Duke agreed to the experiment. He asked to be freed from the beliefs instilled in him, and after that, they would test the sincerity of his experiences and feelings for his future bride. Now Agistine understood that most of all, he would like Cyrena to stay by his side. After this conversation, both decided to move to the Akernia farm and continue there. The Duke insisted on continuing his research and work on his estate. The young man insisted on this, as if to keep the Countess of Melfort from finding out. But there was actually another reason for this. The girl knew that her mother had sent her men to the Akernia estate to watch over the young Duke and report anything suspicious to the Melports. So it was worth being careful with the servants. The siren relaxed and fell asleep in the room specially reserved for her. The girl slept for a very long time. This made her think about how much time she had spent in this estate. There was a knock on the door. It was the Duke of Akernia. He held a bottle of wine in his hands and asked if a guest could enter the room. He wanted to apologize for his rudeness back in the hut. The siren drank the wine. She understood that until the first glass was drunk, the conversation would not take place. That was the true power of alcohol. The atmosphere in the room would soon become more relaxed. Suddenly, Akernia suggested playing a game. The winner would have the right to grant wishes to the loser for the next hour. Siri suggested that they play chess instead. The girl knew what she was offering. She had been learning chess for a long time, and so far, no one had been able to beat her at this game. So the Duke had no chance. But this time, the siren lost 3 times in a row. She tried to use various tricks and deceptions when she knew she was losing. But still, Akernia beat her again and again. Each time, he suggested that she forget the result and start over. Ajestan smiled and pretended not to see the girl's attempts to lose. She was more interested in how he had managed to learn to play chess so well. He didn't just use combinations, he played professionally. The siren admitted defeat. She explained that she agreed to fulfill the young man's wishes for the next hour. All she could do was enjoy her loss and the process going forward. The girl believed that the young man would not take advantage of the situation. He loved her, and under no circumstances did he intend to harm her or tarnish the girl's honor. To begin with, Ajestan asked her to come to him. The next wish was for the girl to sit on his arms. She obeyed, and in a moment they were looking intently into each other's eyes. There was interest and forbidden feeling in them. The Duke asked if he could be completely free in his desires. The siren wondered if he would stop if she refused. Akernia promised that he would not. The young man bit Siri. She tried to pull away, but she knew she wasn't really doing it. Another feeling was beginning to take over her consciousness. It was conquering her and spreading over the thirsty girl's body.